What's up, guys? Welcome back to Vanover Machine and Repair, and we have another interesting video for you today. As you can tell, I am not in Chicago. I'm in the beautiful land of Canada visiting my wife's family, and so while I had some downtime, I figured I'd put this video together for you. We are working at my buddy Patrick's shop. He has a WS2 line boring machine. He is very eager to get into line boring, but just doesn't have the time. So he's contracted me to come into his shop and basically knock out these line boring jobs. Now, in all honesty, this is my first time using the WS2 machine. And so there's a lot of learning in this video, but if nothing else, I can bring you along for the journey. And in several years, when I've mastered using this equipment, we can all come back and kind of laugh at this video. So with that out of the way, let's jump into some line boring. Now we're going to be doing some voiceover on this video here because the lighting was very poor at Patrick's shop and I didn't have the ability to do any narration. So we're just giving you some shots of the 85D and how bad the hole was. You can see there with the bushing how loose it was. And this guy, I've seen worse, but it definitely needed to be done. We're just getting into unboxing the WS2 here. Pretty nice machine overall. Really cool to be able to come in here and really basically play with someone else's toy. It's really important to get your bushings measured out before you even start the job, just to see what you're working with. Typically, I've found that most stuff is nominal, meaning that the pin, in this case, I think it was a 60 mil hole. So the pin will be 60 and then those bushings will be oversized, and then the clearance for the press is built in. So I think that those were like 6/1000 press fit. Maybe some of you guys recognize these alignment cones. These are the cones we made in a previous video. They were actually for Patrick for this machine. You can tell I made them a little tight, but we get them on there eventually. Now, one of the most important things when you're doing line boring is proper alignment, and I am definitely not the expert. I've watched a ton of videos from On Fire Welding, just figuring out how to set this stuff up, and it really seems like the best thing to do is to reference the bar off of another bore, and that's what we're doing here. We're getting this pin above removed so we can get a bar in there and be able to measure between both bars. Because when it's worn out this much on that bottom stick, it's hard to get an idea of where you're at, and you don't want to rely on just the centering cones. You can kind of see the setup here with that second bar. Ideally, it would have been nice to have some bushings on hand. That bore above it was actually in good shape, but I didn't have any reducers, so I'm just using the magnets to kind of hold them in place here. My technique for mounting these bearing blocks could be greatly improved. Initially, I was thinking I wanted to mount them with as minimal deflection as possible, which is good. However, if I would have used the offset blocks later on when I needed to remove the bearings, I could basically unbolt the block and take it off. Whereas in this case, I went just with the bolts, and as a result, later on when I needed to remove them, I basically couldn't, and I had to work around the bearing blocks, so keep that in mind. Here you can see me beating on the bar. I definitely wouldn't recommend this. I actually mushroomed that end over. I was being gentle, but I ended up having to just touch it up on the lathe afterwards. And you can see how tight the bar is. I ended up having to remove the bearing block on the left here and realign the setup so we could get the bar to slide nice and smooth. You want to make sure that bar is moving nice and easy, otherwise you're going to have problems cutting down the end in the future. I think the main culprit of that bearing mount being misaligned is just the movement from welding. It's really important to make sure that those bolts are touching or very close to where they're going to be welded so that they don't pull as much. But once we get this off of here, we get it reset up and the bar slides nice and smooth. Now we're on to the fun part. Now I will say this is a very well-made machine, but there are a couple things just from using it that I would definitely change or I didn't love. And I think the first thing is that this boy is heavy. Now compared to the Climax, this thing is probably 2 or 3 times the weight. And it's very nice that it's heavy in terms of rigidity, but moving it around is not ideal compared to some of the other options out there. Also, the interface that the bar attaches to the machine is a little strange. It uses these angled set screws. It works out fine, but it's just a little bit of an interesting choice. And I'm kind of struggling with getting it lined up properly. While we're on the topic of things that are poorly designed, this mount is a terrible idea. Basically they use like a 1/4 inch wall pipe and they tap it, so there's not much threads in there, and they just do not give you enough room for thread engagement. So you have to basically pull the knob out all the way for it to drop on, and you get like 2 or 3 threads of engagement. Honestly, I don't know why they didn't fix this. You can figure this out by using the machine for about 10 minutes, but hey. With the box on, we're ready to do our first cuts, and overall the cutting process is pretty straightforward. I would say the welding is definitely the more challenging part between the cutting and the welding, but messing around with the speeds and feeds is pretty important. Also, I will second what Curtis talks about, and that is the bar size. A lot of these bars come with a 10 mil tool holder, and really the 10 mil tool holder uses some really small inserts. If you can step up to a 12 mil tool holder, it really goes a long way for rigidity, and the inserts typically last longer. But you got to do some custom bar work for that to make that happen. Might be fine. How many hours on this machine?
This one here?
Yeah.
I think there's still 8,000.
8,000?
We're not sure, 6.5.
At what point do they retire them?
Like, some of them run till they're 20 or something. Most of them probably do, because
Oh, we didn't break that bit. That's good. Try and take it easy. This machine can do way heavier cuts.
oh yeah.
We're just taking it easy. So. All right, we're ready to weld, and I'm telling you, the first hole was beginner's luck. I set the machine up basically on Patrick's recommendations, and we pretty much nailed it on the first try, which is awesome, but I can guarantee you the second hole did not go that smoothly. I guess so, if we end up needing two, it saves a lot more time to do it now than to figure that out then, right? But if we end up needing two, we'll just do two now. If we need it, we're not prepared. Really nice. Nice to have machines do your work. Yep. Maybe a little bit hard to see, but I started the second side and it was not welding great. So we're coming in here with a die grinder to try to get all the boogers out. It was definitely pretty intermittent, and the bore size is so small that really if the weld doesn't land perfectly, it has a hard time being able to get the lance through. So we needed to come in there and kind of clean that out and give a retry. And over here, I'm just kind of explaining that that pass didn't work out. We had to recut it and try again. This will not be the first time that we have to recut out the weld and reattempt. We went ahead and cleaned up the issue we had with the bore. So we got the WS2 flipped around. We are learning with this machine, but we tried it on the other side, kind of feeding in that opposite direction, and we're less successful. So we're gonna take this, we flipped it around to this side, and now we're gonna bore from the inside to the out. That's what we did on the first go, and that's what we've been successful with, and that's what we've done in the past. So we could have probably left that on the other side and fed it in that direction. However, getting it in this side is nice because the torch here is coming back this way. So the shielding gas is kind of moving backwards, as opposed to if this was on the other side, we could pull back from the edge but we'd basically be pulling back, so our edge would be a little bit more difficult. Getting this flipped around allows us to have a really nice edge here on the finish pass as it works its way back out. So we'll get this reset up and we'll get the bore welder in there and give it another go. So one thing I don't love about this setup is there's all these keyways you gotta align, so it just makes it a little bit more difficult. I see why they do that. It makes sure that the inner race on the bearing doesn't spin, but it makes it a pain to set it up because they're spinning and you can't really see in here. I feel like there's a better design. Overall, this machine is nice, but it also leaves some room for improvement, which is a little disappointing considering it's just obvious stuff, like you use the machine for 10 minutes and you already figure out how to improve it. Couldn't they have used it for 10 minutes and come to those same conclusions? But maybe not. After 4 or 5 goes, we got it. That's literally perfect. Literally perfect. Now we didn't end up needing to do a second pass on this side. In fact, it just created extra work for us. But I thought since we're over here and since I was being successful, it would be better to do a second pass and not need it and cut it out than to not do it and save the 20 minutes and need it and have to reset it up. So in general, that's probably a good practice. Adjusting these tools on these smaller bores and measuring them is pretty difficult. We actually had to modify the supplied bore gauge because it was a little too tall. On bigger stuff, I'm sure it'll be fine, but on the little stuff, it's really tight in there. I also do not recommend setting the tool holder depth this way. The magnetic base is fine, but you want to have it on the bar because as the bar rotates slightly, the measurement changes. With it mounted to the stick like this, as the bar kind of moves back and forth, it kind of rides up on the radius of the tool. So in the future, you want to make sure your mag base is on the bar. Since this job did go multiple days, on the first day I went back to the shop and made a custom 12mm bar with a reduced shank. I was able to run that bar on these subsequential holes, and it had a lot more rigidity, especially when it comes to facing. So that little midget bar, I'm going to call it, worked out really nice. We could take faster and deeper cuts and get a better finish overall and be more aggressive, especially on the facing cuts. Those little 10mm bars are kind of weak. This pneumatic chamfer tool works really nice for doing a chamfer, but I wouldn't recommend it depending on the seal. The seal for this was only like a 1/4 inch wide, and so the way I had this set up, I just didn't change my depth, and it put a pretty heavy chamfer on there. It ended up being fine, but it really kind of minimized some of the contact area, so just watch out for that. Why do you modulate it?
I'm just. I don't want to pull them too fast because it galls.
Okay, okay. There we go. There she is. Do you normally lubricate it when you throw it in, or go dry?
A lot of people have different opinions about that, but
I see some people like aniseeds.
some people with aniseed on them, some people don't. I know you get last guy, I think you doesn't do it, right? Because there's sometimes.
What do you think? More, less?
That should be good right there.
All right. Well, guys, that just about wraps it up. I don't have any final footage or shots of the pin and or the seals being installed. Patrick just did that one of the following days and got everything buttoned up. But I really am excited to be doing this type of work. Now, ideally, I would love to just work in my shop entirely, and that's what we will be doing. However, there will be a couple off-site jobs I do in the future, and when possible, I would love to bring you along. Now, as we talked about in the whole video, this is a learning process for me. It's just another arrow in my quiver in terms of just another skill that I can have. And I think line boring definitely goes hand in hand with machining and fabricating, especially since I would love to do more heavier equipment and larger machine work. So I'm excited to kind of go down that journey and basically build a new skill set. Let me know what you think about the video down below, and we'll see you in the next one.